Hello, everyone, and I'd like to welcome our Vatican correspondent, Michael Haynes. How have you been, Michael?
Not too bad, thank you, Murray. Good to be with you again. How are you keeping?
Oh, I'm doing very well. It's been an interesting week in Vatican politics, and we're seeing a lot of action on the geopolitical front, and also in when it comes to Roman politics. So we'll get into it, right away. I wanted to talk a little bit about how the pontificate is shaping up when it comes to how Pope Leo is communicating himself. Because this is something that we saw now. He's introduced to this catechetical series on, I think it's Wednesdays. He's talking about the Second Vatican Council. But there's also been some very interesting addresses where I think we're starting to see how he is speaking, how he is communicating. And a very interesting one was his address to the diplomatic corps, which has been called the State of the World Address. So I'm hoping you can talk a little bit about that. What stood out to you in that address, and what is standing out to you in regards to Pope Leo just in general, how he's communicating compared to Pope Francis and his earlier predecessor in Benedict?
Absolutely. So this was his first State of the World address. This is when all the diplomats who are accredited to the Holy See, they all gather in the Hall of Benedictions, which is right behind that famous central loggia where we're used to seeing the Pope come out and give the blessings on Christmas Day and Easter Sunday. So this was his first such occasion, and it has become basically the occasion for the Pope to not just address the diplomats there, but address really the world at large, because everybody is kind of waiting to hear what he's going to say to all as they're there together. It's one thing to issue a private rebuke, but it's another to actually kind of give a public schooling in a sense. So at the time, I think the interesting things that I focused in on were his comments on pro-life issues, because we've seen Pope Francis mention abortion when he's given these speeches before, but Pope Leo did mention abortion, but he mentioned it quite a few times. And then he also took issue with euthanasia and with surrogacy. And all of these issues in various countries around the world are really being pushed quite heavily, especially at the moment with things like euthanasia, I think, and surrogacy. So that, for me, was really quite interesting, particularly when he linked the promotion of abortion to the way international bodies will promote abortion as a kind of as part and parcel of a wider aid package, perhaps. And the UN is, of course, famous for doing this under the auspices of its Sustainable Development Goals. And I think this was itself under attack somewhat from the Pope. He did praise the UN somewhat for trying to foster peace in various parts of the world, but then he took direct aim at these policies. So for me, that was a very welcome step, because we've seen the Vatican really develop quite close links with the United Nations in previous years, with various pacts for climate change issues, for education of children, all of which sadly have been involving the Vatican more closely with policies which do involve the promotion of either abortion directly or contraception. So to see that rebuke from the Pope, I thought was a very welcome step, and it showed a little bit more precision and a little bit more clarity than we have been used to hearing it in recent years.
Hey everyone, for full access to this episode, the Pelican Brief Weekly Show, and more coverage from Michael Haynes, go become a Pelican subscriber. You can use the code MURRAY for a little bit of a discount. You get access to the prayer app and more. Yeah, something that we've seen a lot of commentary here on the Pelican Brief about from Sarah Vervai is he's made the case that Pope Leo is less of a liberal Democrat in the sense of promoting liberalism on a global scale, of promoting democracies in every country, as if it's an absolute necessity in the modern world for every country to have a democracy. And also that he suggests that there's a shift in relations for the Vatican and these international bodies like the UN, but also the other international bodies that are working as NGOs. What do you detect in this State of the World address, but also just Pope Leo's statement? Do you sense that he is a bit different from the other popes in regards to his stance towards democracy? Do you think his formation in Latin America might have played a role in that? Just from your on-the-ground seeing things, talking to people, what do you get a sense of in regards to his politics and his stance on these more political matters in the state?
I think the interesting thing with Leo as opposed to Francis is that Leo is obviously much more reserved, and whereas with Francis we were used to seeing these often very controversial comments on the plane, or just in the middle of a prepared speech, with Leo he doesn't tend to do that. Sure, he does give his weekly little meet and greet with some of the journalists on Tuesday evenings normally, but it seems that he can delineate somewhat between perhaps his personal politics, which is understood of maybe favouring or leaning more towards the Democratic side in the US, and then his public stance, which he must profess as Pope and must represent the Church in the diplomatic scene as he's doing. So I think yeah, as you say, we have seen him do less of the promotion of the political style of Pope Francis, and I think his quieter, more nuanced approach has won a little bit more respect for the Holy See. It certainly presented the Holy See as much more settled and a stable entity to engage in international dialogue with. Interestingly enough, we saw the Secretary of State, Cardinal Parolin. He had been trying to essentially negotiate safe passage for Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro over to Russia. Now, Cardinal Parolin had been the nuncio in Venezuela before, but I think the fact he was able to apparently come to the conclusion of a potential deal to have Maduro go to Russia suggests that there is actually a little bit more influence for the Holy See in the diplomatic sphere than we've perhaps thought over the last couple of years, or maybe that there is more influence returning, which I would definitely be a very welcome thing, because it has taken a hit under Pope Francis, that's for sure.
Mm-hmm. Before shifting over to the more liturgical side of things, I want to talk about that meeting with the Fraternity of St. Peter Superiors, but staying on this point of international relations just for a minute, you gave a great report for the Pelican Brief talking about these 4 U.S. cardinals. They're pretty notorious. We had Cardinal Tobin, we had Cardinal Supich, Cardinal McElroy, sending this letter out that really did put themselves in opposition to the Trump administration. Now, I don't think anybody thought that they were a bunch of Trump supporters, but at the same time, it was an interesting, organized letter that when you have that many princes of the church, that many cardinals writing a letter like that, it is significant on its own. Do you think that Pope Leo is influenced much by the more liberal faction? Again, liberal is kind of a strange word here, but certainly the more progressive wing of the College of Cardinals. Do you imagine that he will be influenced to take a more oppositional stance towards the Trump administration in regards to these latest policies towards Greenland, towards Venezuela, in really just the Trump foreign policy in general? Do you see himself putting the Holy See in opposition to the Trump administration due to this influence of the more progressive wing of cardinals?
I think I would be a little surprised to see the Pope himself take any more direct intervention, perhaps. We have seen Cardinal Parolin make some statements on the sidelines of a few events this weekend, trying to effectively echo what the Pope said in that the pursuing of war or conflict is not generally going to actually bring about any resolution. So I personally would be of the opinion that what we'll see more of is a little bit of what we saw a preview of yesterday. So these cardinals drew heavily from Pope Leo's State of the World address. They quoted it in big chunks, and I think we'll see particularly those cardinals, maybe the nuncio, although he is about to turn 80 at the end of this month, and there's perhaps an understanding that he might be swapped out at some point. So maybe it's going to be those cardinals taking the lead, and as with any dramatic or big international events, the Pope will perhaps address them briefly at his Wednesday audience or Sunday Angelus. He might make some comments on those occasions, but I think he will personally be a little bit more distant from the Trump administration.
Yeah, I saw a lot of more left-leaning Catholics speculate that the Pope was going to excommunicate J.D. Vance or some of these other drastic actions. I just don't see that when it comes to looking at Pope Leo's personality, his past approaches to things. I don't see that, certainly, in the near future.
Hey there, thanks for watching. If you want to see the full video, you're going to have to go to pelicanplus.com and sign up for our groundbreaking, truly Catholic platform. You can find your favorite podcasts. You can find your favorite prayers. You can find your favorite authors and even your favorite books. Visit pelicanplus.com and find out more.